I'm William Shatner, sometimes known as Walter Bascom, in a future I created called Tekwar. Welcome to Capstone, and prepare to witness the technology of the future today in Tekwar, the game of CD-ROM.
William Shatner's Tekwar is a series of novels created by Shatner himself, set in the 23rd century and focusing on an illegal drug known as Tek. The protagonist of the books is a former police officer hired by a security firm to track down the sources of Tek in the city. Now, Tek is a chip that's implanted into the user's brain, giving them powerful simulated fantasies, with the downside of including side effects like paranoia and death.
Simple enough.
Tekwar eventually spawned a comic book and TV series, as well as a video game developed in 1995 by Capstone Software. It's a first-person shooter where you take on the role of the previously mentioned police officer, brought out of cryosleep or stasis, or whatever it's called, by Shatner's character Walter Bascom to root out the Tek threat in the city.
You start near Midtown and work your way through the area.
Selecting from one of 7 missions and using the city subway system to get around, you'll explore multiple areas as you track down and assassinate the Tek dealers, or known as TekLords. When you're in public areas, if you pull out your weapon around civilians, people will freak out and run for cover, and the cops will even tell you to drop your gun before opening fire, which is a neat touch. Shatner appears in between missions to give you a briefing on what you're going to be up against, and also appears at the end of the mission to chastise or congratulate you on your performance.
Well, it looks like I was right about thawing you out. You got DeMarco, you managed to keep yourself from getting killed, and you kept the civilians out of the action as well.
If you're able to get through a mission without killing any cops or innocent people, he'll give you a good old pat on the back. But if you end up going on a murdering spree, killing too many bystanders, he'll tear you a new asshole.
Not only did you let Janus get away, but you left behind enough carnage to fill a cemetery. Don't you get it? The more of them you kill, the more Janus will want you dead.
This doesn't seem to change too much, if anything at all, and despite his frequent threats to throw the protagonist back into cryostasis, you can still keep going around murdering innocent people to your heart's content. Shatner's performance really is so bad that it actually ends up being good. To kill the TekLords, you first need to find them, and what this normally boils down to is finding both a red and blue keycard, which will unlock the area where they most often reside. As I said before, each mission has a subway system which you can use to access one of 3 or 4 separate levels. These are modelled off realistic locations like banks, hospitals and factories, and there is quite a lot of detail put into modelling these environments, even down to something like giving each building its own bathrooms. Each of these levels may or may not have the keycards required, though instead of just finding them on the ground, more often than not they're held by enemies. What this means is that you'll have to search every nook and cranny to kill all the bad guys, lest you end up missing that much coveted keycard. There's about 6 or so weapons on offer, a couple of pistols, a rocket launcher type thingy, flamethrower, and a weapon that gives enemies in a single hit. They're fun to play around with, I guess, but the pistols are your best bet, as you couldn't run out of ammo for them if you tried, and they kill everything pretty easily. Enemies consist of various thugs, holograms of the TekLord you're currently chasing, and just other species of pond scum that inhabit the city. And aside from increased health, they all seem to function alike, using the same weapons and usually just standing in one place and shooting you relentlessly. You have got a ridiculous amount of health in this game, and enemies are really just a minor nuisance more than an actual threat. The only thing that might cause a bit of grief is trying to shoot above or below you. It's often easier just to run past these enemies entirely. When you do track a TekLord down, you'd expect them to have some sort of high-powered weapon, or at least use some different tactics, but they function the same as your standard thug, and can be killed just as quickly, which is a little bit disappointing. Tekwar has the honour of being one of the first games ever made using Ken Silverman's build engine, and I guess in that regard it doesn't look too bad, considering when it was released. The issue is that the scale of everything feels a little bit off. Certain NPCs are much too big for the environment, for instance, looking out of place, and a lot of interiors are really cramped and cluttered. But there's some undeniably good texture work here and there. The way they've used photographs of real people for the character models reminds me of that old arcade game, Lethal Enforcers. It might seem like a lazy way to get the job done, but I think it works in capturing the gritty, realistic look it seems they were going for. Compared to Capstone's previous efforts like Corridor 7 and Witch Haven and, dare I say it, Operation Body Count, this is easily the best game they've ever made, but that's not really saying much. I got a real soft spot for cyberpunk games, and the premise I find to be really appealing, but ultimately it's just wasted potential. They could have had all manner of futuristic powers, weapons, and abilities. I mean, this is a game set in the 23rd century after all. The other thing is that, like most capstone games, it doesn't really tell you what the hell you're supposed to be doing. It just kind of drops you into this large world with little to no objectives, and it can be a little bit confusing.
I suppose you're wondering why you're here.
It's not a long nor hard game, and I think I finished it in about 2 hours of on and off playing. The only real redeeming feature is having a pixelated William Shatner taking up your screen and reading poorly written dialogue off an auto cue.
What can I say? You blew it. If the need weren't so great, I'd have you on the next flight back to the freezer. But at least you didn't get any civilians killed. Now get out there and do it right.
It runs pretty well in DOSBox, but it can take a bit of fiddling around with the settings to get it running smoothly and to get the controls to your liking, but I can't really imagine why anyone would ever want to. If you just want to play a mid-90s shooter and nothing else, then this should be the last place you look.